What's up, Thrill Nerds? John here. Today we're going to give a little visit to King's Dominion in Virginia. I grew up going to this park, and it's one that I've always kept a close eye on. Lately, there's been one area in particular that I've been thinking a lot about, and not because it's bad, but because it's so good. But even being so good, something feels a little bit off. So let's get into my thoughts on Jungle X-Pedition. Most people come to an amusement park to disconnect. They're here to get away from work, from routines, from everything pulling at them during the week. Ride a few rides, eat something bad for you, spend time together, and honestly, I still do that. But because I surround myself with amusement parks all the time, and something I'm constantly thinking about, I notice a lot of details that most guests aren't looking for. And it's not because they're doing anything wrong, but because they don't need to. They're not paying attention to pacing or sightlines or why an area feels energized and another one feels forgettable. But even if guests never consciously think about those things, they still feel them. Those are the quiet, subconscious details that can shape an entire visit, sometimes without people ever realizing it. And to be clear, I'm not someone who nitpicks parks for the sake of it, but this park is different to me. I grew up coming here, this place matters to me. So when I look at it now, I don't do it with a checklist or a complaint sheet. I do it because I genuinely want to see it succeed in the best way possible. Not just with new rides, but with experiences that work. The kind that guests don't notice individually, but feel it all day long. And when you start looking at parks that way, through how they feel instead of just what they offer, some things start to stand out. Because Jungle X-Pedition is, without a question, the most themed area in this park. It's intentional, it's dense, it feels planned and not patched together. The landscape is thoughtful, the pathways feel deliberate, sightlines are controlled in a way that most areas of the park aren't. And that's exactly why things that don't fit here feel so noticeable. Not because they're a bad ride, and not because they don't work on their own, but because they speak a completely different language than the rest of the land. Backlot Stunt Coaster is the most obvious example. You're walking through this dense, immersive jungle environment, and then suddenly you're staring at exposed concrete, city billboards, and a full-on urban chase scene.
What the hell is this?
It pulls you out of the moment instantly. And then there's Flight of Fear. The ride itself is great, but from the outside it feels strangely disconnected. The transition from jungle to wide-open concrete plaza is abrupt. There's no feeling that you've stumbled onto something hidden.
Let's rule out aliens for now and concentrate on what we know.
It feels like the park knows exactly what it's doing everywhere else in this land, which makes these moments stand out even more. And this is usually where the conversation goes in a different direction. Because at this point, it would be really easy to start talking about rides. What should be added? What should be changed? What should be replaced? But that's not actually the question I keep coming back to. The more time I spend in Jungle X-Pedition, the more I notice how people move through it. This is the strongest land in the park. It's immersive, it's energetic, there's always motion happening around you. And yet, people don't really stop here. They walk through it, they pass attractions, they move from one ride to the next. There isn't a natural pause. There's no moment where people slow down, look around, and say, hey, let's hang out here for a bit.
What is he talking about, Mommy?
And that's not something most guests would ever consciously notice. They don't leave saying, this land lacks a gathering point. They just feel like something never quite landed. I keep asking myself questions like, where do families actually regroup in this land? Where do people stop and watch something together? What's the moment that pulls everyone's attention in the same direction? And every time I walk through here, I keep coming back to the same answer. There isn't one. There's plenty of energy, plenty of movement, plenty of great attractions, but there's nothing that gives all of that motion a place to settle. This is the point where it finally helps to stop thinking about rides for a second and start thinking about how people actually use a park. Families naturally gather where there is something to watch, something to talk about, and somewhere where they can sit and relax and just exist together for a bit. Those places don't happen by accident. They're designed. And when you look at Jungle X-Pedition through that lens, one thing becomes really clear. Lake Charles is the largest underused asset in the land. It didn't used to be this way. This area used to be active. It used to be watchable. It used to feel like a part of the experience instead of something you just walk past. Now, the lake is still visually present, but functionally, it's been ignored. The people don't gather here, they don't stop and look, they move around their way onto something else. Which is why a jungle-style lakeside restaurant built right along the water makes sense, similar to the Grand Pavilion at Cedar Point. A place with a patio or a dock that looks out across the lake. A space designed to slow people down and pull them together. That kind of structure creates a social hub. Somewhere where families regroup. Somewhere where people sit together longer than they plan to. And here's the key part. You don't build a lakeside patio, especially one meant to face the water, unless there's something worth watching. Parks don't place premium gathering spaces on the edge of a lake randomly. That orientation is intentional. It signals that the view matters. Pantherion would be a super fun view across the lake, but maybe there could be something more to this, but we'll get into that later.
Well, jazz flute has always been a small passion of mine.
So once you start looking at Lake Charles as a good center point, it also becomes pretty clear what doesn't fully solve this problem with the land. Take Backlot Stunt Coaster. Could it be rethemed to better fit Jungle X-Pedition? Yeah, and honestly, that would be a real improvement. Replacing the exposed concrete and urban facades with jungle theming would clean up sightlines across the lake and finally make that side feel like it belongs in the land instead of fighting it. But even a really solid retheme doesn't give the lake a role. It adds cohesion, it improves immersion, but it still just adds motion. And motion isn't what this land is missing. The same thing applies to Flight of Fear. That ride should feel like you stumbled onto a secret operation hidden deep in the jungle, something you weren't meant to find. Closing in the approach, tightening the space, and letting the jungle swallow the building, all of which would absolutely improve the experience. But even then, it's still an improvement to a transition, not a solution for the land. It doesn't turn Lake Charles into a destination, it doesn't create a shared moment, and it doesn't give the restaurant across the water something meaningful to look at. So this isn't about whether these rides can be better, because they can. It's about the fact that fixing them alone doesn't solve the bigger issue. They clean up the edges, but they don't create a center, and that's the difference. And I want to be clear about something here. I know this isn't Universal, and I know it's not Disney. That's not what I'm asking for, and honestly, it doesn't need to be. But investing in more immersive, intentional environments like this can only strengthen the guest experience, even if general public never consciously realize what's happening. Most guests aren't going to walk out saying, "Wow, that land had great pacing," or "That space really encouraged shared moments." They're just going to say they had a better day. They stayed longer, they felt more connected, things flowed a little bit more naturally. And that kind of impact, the kind that people feel without being able to explain, is exactly why these details matter. So if you step back and look at Jungle X-Pedition as a whole, one thing becomes really clear. This land is built around animal guardians. Each one represents a specific behavior. How the ride moves, how it feels, how it exists in its space. Each major animal has its own temple, its own role in the land. You've got animals that feel chaotic, animals that feel fast and aggressive, and animals that soar overhead or stay low and flowing. They're all different. They're all accounted for, almost. Because there is one animal that keeps showing up across Jungle X-Pedition, on signage, on artwork, in visual language of the land, a serpent, a snake. And unlike the others, it doesn't have a temple. That's where things start to feel interesting. And every time I start pulling on those threads, my attention keeps drifting back to the same place, the lake. And that's when the land stops feeling broken and starts feeling incomplete. Like something was planned, but hasn't been placed yet. So when I put this all together, the lake, the missing function, the animal temples, this is the option I keep coming back to. A Vekoma tilt coaster. And yes, it is exciting, but more importantly, it does something very specific that nothing else here does. A tilt coaster creates a pause. The train stops, it hangs, people notice it, and that pause builds tension without needing speed or noise. From a guest perspective, It's extremely easy to understand. You don't need to explain what's happening. You can see it from across the land, which makes it watchable. And watchability is the missing piece here. We've already seen this work well at Cedar Point with Siren's Curse. People don't just line up to ride it, they stop and watch it cycle. And that's the behavior that this area doesn't currently have. From a theming standpoint, a serpent fits naturally. Snakes don't rush, they wait, and that tension lines up perfectly with the tilt element. Placed over the water, that movement finally gives the lake something to do again. It also allows for a modern nod to an anaconda, not as nostalgia, but as continuity, possibly even a tunnel drop beneath the water. And when you zoom out, this is where the pieces actually start working together. The lake isn't just scenery, the restaurant and bar on the water aren't just dining, and the ride isn't just a coaster. They all support each other. People sit at the restaurant, they watch the ride, they wait for the next cycle, and that's why this keeps making sense to me. That's the option that keeps solving the same problems. It gives the lake something to do, and it gives this land a place to settle. Most people who visit this park will never think about animal temples, or guest flow, or why one space feels better than another. They're just going to feel like the land works. Like things flowed better, like they stayed a little longer, and like the experience felt a little bit more complete. And honestly, that's the goal. And with all that said, thanks for hanging out with me for a bit. If you stuck around through this whole video, I genuinely appreciate it. I put a lot of thought into these, and it means a lot knowing people enjoy going down these rabbit holes with me. If you like this kind of discussion, the slower, more thoughtful side of theme parks and attractions, you should check out my podcast, Coaster Chronicles, on the Coaster Cuzzies podcast once a month. It's a lot of coaster talk, park stories, and conversations like this. Sometimes more structured, sometimes just like hanging out and talking rides. And if you enjoyed this video, consider liking it, subscribing, and sticking around. There's a lot more coming, and I've been having a lot of fun making these videos. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if you noticed something I didn't. And thanks for watching. I hope to see you at the parks.